All right, everybody. This is another special edition of Free for All, so to speak, of Mysteries of Manitowoc, episode 5. So far, we are joined with Thomas Myrtle, Milbillie, Jamie, and we are waiting on another guest as well. Um, Today, we're just going to be talking about a bunch of different topics. First, I was just going to ask everybody how they're making out during this virus. If you want to start out, Billy, how are things going in Milwaukee? You said.
Uh, my life, I'm working more than I was. That's what changed for me. I feel bad for
That,
these people that aren't able to work, but yeah, I wish I was one of them people that didn't have to go to work, but unfortunately, I have to.
Me too. That's the same as that. We haven't worked like a whole bunch of overtime in the last 2 years because our company is about to get sold again. This would be the third time it's been sold since I've been working there, and all of a sudden they're wanting us to work overtime. You know, during the apocalypse, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now they're wanting us to work Saturday and Sunday. I told them no. So I'm not there this weekend. But what about in Canada, Thomas? How's it going up there?
Well, the Canadian government is basically advising us to stay in our houses, not to have friends over, not to have contact with anybody. We're hearing all kinds of terrible news every day about, there's record new cases in Ontario where I live and everything. And I'm definitely seeing, at least in the way that it's being covered, indications that there are going to be changes coming down the pike, changes to be implemented, which is very disturbing to me, but, you carry on. I've just been hunkered down and, kind of trying to stay, have a few periods out in nature and stuff and not have too much of the fortress mentality that they're trying to give us because, I ultimately think that's just, population control in a way. You control the population by getting everybody to stay in their houses, but that's
Yeah, and that's the conversation I had with an inspector Friday. He said, he told me that he is a constitutionalist and he is a Republican. However, he said that he has concerns that one man with the stroke of a pen can tell you that you have to stay in your house and you have to do this. And I sympathize with that ideal, but at the same time, I think we do have to. I know the train of thought, like if you give an inch, you give a mile, but I think in situations like this, the government, I don't know. I kind of get the sense that they're really just trying to, stop the spread of it. But
it is a
it
unique
is,
situation. It is a unique situation.
If the shit hits the fan, I'm going to the woods.
yeah, right. That's what I told my wife when this first got started. She's like, "What are we gonna do?" I'm like, I'm a country boy,
I'm going to the
and
woods.
I have tons of guns and ammo. There's tons of rabbits,
Nice.
squirrels, and all kind of stuff out in the back, in the woods. I ain't worried about it. But Mr. Jamie, where are you from?
North Dakota, Minnesota area. I live in Minnesota, work in North Dakota.
Okay. I'm assuming everything's probably pretty much the same where you're at.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad though. I mean, I've been working from home since Wednesday afternoon. Um, Everybody else has got to work. I mean,
I know.
we're open for emergency because we deal with a lot of food industries. I deal with industrial equipment, bucket elevators, and grain, that kind of industry. So even my customers, though, they're saying, I mean, when I go in there to deliver stuff, it's I get in, deliver my stuff, I get out. There's no hanging out and talking and walking through the plants like normal. So our company just figured, well, why waste money going out and seeing customers when everything is just so quick, and just be efficient and do everything from home. So we North Dakota has only got about 700,000 to 800,000 people. So I mean, per capita, I mean, there's
Yeah.
I'm sure where Millbillie's at. I mean, that's probably just one neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not so bad. But now on the Minnesota side, all the illnesses are we're starting to see them all like down. They're starting down towards Minneapolis because it's an international airport. So and then
Cities are
it's
gonna
all
get
going
hit
from
first.
there.
You can
What's
see
that?
the big cities are getting hit first. Look at New York. Look at all of California now.
New Orleans is pretty hard hit down here.
Yeah,
Um,
my sister was just in New Orleans last weekend or 2 weeks ago. Partied down there and everything. Now you look down there, it's a ghost town.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. They canceled everything, and for New
Look at-
Orleans to cancel
look at Vegas.
parades,
Vegas
it's
shut down.
yeah. So, Millbilly, I noticed last weekend, I believe it was, and I watched, I say 98% of it. Y'all covered Andrew or Andy Colburn's lawsuit. Y'all talked a lot about that, and I noticed y'all had Travis on there. Um, could you summarize maybe anything y'all took away from there in that video that y'all made last week? Is there anything you want to bring up about that? I know Jamie was on there with you as well.
Yeah, Travis is. Well, I'll let Millbilly go ahead if you
Yeah,
got it.
either one. It don't matter.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Travis coming on that was something that happened. He was trying to respond to a couple questions, and having Travis on is always awesome.
Mhm.
He's got a I've known Travis for 2 years now, and when I first came into this case and I had legal questions, he just has a way of putting it where understanding the
understandable.
legal,
Yeah.
because the legal stuff to me is, I mean, there's no common sense in our legal system at all.
Right.
I shouldn't say that. That sounds bad. I don't want to, make lawyers and all that sound bad, but it just seems like it does lack a lot of common sense, and it seems more of a game than anything. And that's, to me, some of the stuff that Travis was talking about was, yeah, there almost is a little bit of a game of chess when you're dealing with the legal system, whether it's Colburn's case, some of the things that they're doing and saying, that it just it's like chess moves, that's the way I look at it. But Travis has definitely got a lot of good information, and definitely can give you a good understanding of the law side of it.
Right. What about you, Millville? Did you take? Because I know I'm pretty positive you've probably read almost all of it by now, right? Depositions and stuff.
As far as Andrew Colburn's lawsuit, yeah.
Yeah, I figured you did. I mean, is there anything? Because we're going to get to some stuff that maybe I found interesting, but maybe I just read too far into it. But is there anything you took away, like very important?
The fact that Colburn admits that he's a public figure.
Yeah,
That
I seen where you was talking about that, and that is important in terms of the lawsuit. Thomas, have you had a chance to read any or all of the depositions?
Certainly, I've gone through some of them, and to me, one of the things that stuck out the most was that Thomas Fallon was at that September 2003 meeting.
Right, I read that.
Where Lautenschlager and the DCI and Mark Rohrer and Michael Griesbach and kind of the Manitowoc officials met in Madison with the Wisconsin Attorney General's office and the DCI, and Thomas Fallon, before the lawsuit, before Avery's prosecution, is right there at that meeting. Thomas Fallon is part of that meeting, and I thought that was hugely significant. Possibly indicates that Fallon might have had even something to do with the December 2003 report that cleared Manitowoc County and stuff. I think that's a distinct possibility now. It just stunned me to see that Thomas Fallon, who was far from the only person in that specific position — there are many assistant attorney generals, I understand. It was interesting to see that he was right there at that meeting, involved just days after Avery's release.
Right, and I actually the ones that I read today, and my brain still hurts from reading. I think Cachet's was 158 pages or something like that, and I hope that guy did. Speaking of, real quick on a side note, does anybody know if they're close to raising the full amount to get the videos of those depositions? I know they was close.
They couldn't be that far, because I from what I heard, it was like 4,000 and something for the paper copies of the depositions, and probably another 1,000 or so for the videos as well.
Yeah, and I read the same thing you was just referencing, Thomas, about Tom Fallon being there. But what was strange or not strange is that that's really the only person that he could remember being there, because they asked, was this person there? Was that person there? And he said he couldn't remember any of them other than Tom Fallon, and I
Mark
found that
Rohr didn't
kind of
remember
strange.
anything. Mark
Exactly. Yeah.
Just count how many times he doesn't recall something that any normal person would recall. It's countless moments where Mark Rohr has seemingly inexplicable lapses in his memory. But I mean, just take for instance that secret meeting, as I would characterize it, during the same period of September 2003. This secret meeting with Thomas Kosurik, where he admits that he didn't take notes. He's a lawyer. He knows he should take notes at this type of an occasion. And they ask him, well, why didn't you take notes? And he says, well, I just didn't. And then they ask him who was present. When it happened, how did it happen, under what circumstances. Doesn't have answers for any of that. It's just I don't recall, over and over and over and over again. I think it's pretty obvious that Rohr deliberately did not take notes because he knew that notes would be subject to discovery, and so this was a conscious decision, most likely on the part of him and Kosurik, to not have any notes taken at that meeting.
Right, and I noticed that throughout both of those depositions that Rohr was more rehearsed at when to say I do not recall, more so than Cachet, because I noticed Cachet kind of got himself into a couple little conundrums during the course of that deposition. And I noticed in one of the segments where they flat out showed him somebody else's statement showing, telling him that they seen somebody from the jail bring Kosurik a stack of photos, and that Cachet and Kosurik went into the room with Penny Bernstein at the same time, and he was sitting there saying that it didn't happen. So, I mean, that's just obvious that they're going to deny all of that.
Right, because that forms that also is very significant in terms of Couchet's contacts with Penny Bernstein, and exactly the nature of the contacts with Penny Bernstein and the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. Because, of course, one of the arguments that they've always made as to why he couldn't have traced the sketch, which I think he obviously did, but one of the arguments that they've always made is that, oh well, she says that he made it from her description and everything, but we don't know what happened between him and her, between her and the other officials and law enforcement there. We don't know how that, you have to remember she was in a heavily traumatized state, and you have a number of people who clearly had agendas having access to her, and we don't really know what happened between those people.
What about the fact that they arrest Stephen Avery, and then she starts to get phone calls?
Right.
And then she mentions that to the sheriff. Oh, don't worry about it. It's probably nothing.
Yeah. And they sent, when she started getting those phone calls, they sent Judy Dvorak, of all people, to check on her and tell her, oh, it's all okay. Judy Dvorak, was the one who knocked on her door and took her report about the phone calls. And it's interesting, in fact, that Gregory Allen, who, of course, it's always been my position that he, like many walking nightmares, kind of marauding the streets, creating kind of the fear that leads to this kind of reactionary legislation, to death penalty legislation, and all this type of I believe that Gregory Allen was systematically protected. And of course, Gregory Allen's last victim as well was also received harassing phone calls. So this was something that they also knew was something that was a kind of a tag of Gregory Allen's, that this is something that he did.
Yeah, and that's another interesting thing, like you pointed out before, Thomas. And I'm gonna get to you, Jamie. I've never dealt with this many guests, so it's hard for me to. But
that's all right, man.
I just don't want anybody to think I'm, But it's interesting, Thomas, that you brought up many times before that. I guess you call it the Gregory Allen syndrome, where it's like he's systematically protected. And in the case that I'm looking into now, I'm trying to get the author of the book, Murder in the Bayou. I'm trying to get him on my channel. I just emailed him Friday. But the pimp in Jeff Davis Parish down here in Louisiana that was running these girls, I had mentioned to you before, he was arrested 23 times before and never had one conviction.
That's classic.
So, exactly.
And there's so many other examples I could show you that, there's individuals. If you look at a number of people who have gained infamy as serial killers, you'll notice this same pattern around a lot of them, where they commit, offenses that you would expect in the United States justice system. Many times in states like Texas where they don't play around, you have people committing these offenses and repeatedly being treated with kid gloves by law enforcement and by the courts. And it raises the question of exactly, what's going on with these people. I told you about the story with Jeffrey Dahmer where, the cops literally arrested him with a 14-year-old boy. They didn't arrest him. I'm sorry. They found the 14-year-old boy. They were called because the 14-year-old boy was running naked, drugged, terrified, trying to get away from him. And the cops come and basically Jeffrey Dahmer is somehow able to convince them, according to the official story, that this 14-year-old boy is his boyfriend. And the cops end up transporting the boy or allowing Dahmer to bring the boy back to his apartment. And that's just, we're supposed to believe that was because Dahmer talked his way out of the situation. I don't know. It just seems, and there's a number of instances like that. I told you before about the time that Gregory Allen basically punched a police officer in the face. He was being pursued for, I believe, a theft, and an officer in uniform, he punched him in the face. And, you find me one person who can do something like that and get away with it. That Vogel basically let him walk.
Mr. Jamie, your thoughts on and I hope you don't mind me calling you Mister. I got griped at the other day at work because I called a guy Mister and he didn't like that. But that's just how I'm just like that. But
It's a southern
what are
thing.
your thoughts on? Yeah, what are your thoughts on Cachet's sketch? I mean, anything surrounding that? Just any thoughts in general?
It's for me, the sketch, it obviously does look like it was traced, but I've never seen a whole lot of his other sketches to see how good of a job he does. I mean, and now he's passed away.
And I think, let me interrupt real quick before I forget, because I'm going to let you have the floor back. But I think that's important that you bring up is we don't know exactly how good of a freehand drawer this guy was, because what's important is even if they didn't directly show Penny Bernstein, hey, this is the guy that we think did, or what have you, the fact that Glenn was Stephen's attorney kept bringing up the idea that, well, even if you didn't trace it or whatever, you still knew that because they mentioned a whole bunch of times that it was a fact that somebody said when she was describing the assailant that this sounds like Stephen Avery. So, that he previously had just seen his photograph in the case where he ran Sandra Morse off the road, that depending on how good of a freehand drawer this guy is, he could have still. But I mean, it looks so strikingly similar to the the mugshot because of the curly hair, and obviously Stephen Avery hair was straight during that time. So I mean, I think it's pretty accurate that he probably, at a minimum, was looking at that photo or had seen it before he started his sketch.
And in fact, Fred Hazelwood, the judge in the case, remarked at the time and during the trial that the sketch bore a striking resemblance to Avery's January 85 mugshot. So,
Right. So
real quick though,
I was going to continue. My bad.
Well, Disco Pervert just said it takes years to learn to draw those sketches. It's not a watercolor challenge for pensioners. That's actually pretty funny.
It's interesting too because Couchet did say during the deposition, I believe, he did say that was the first sketch that he had done that was used in a court case. I got the impression from reading it that he didn't really wasn't a sketch artist, at least in his normal career and all that.
So that brings up something else, because if you look at how many other firsts were done in this case, when you look at Sherry Cohane with her breaking protocol, first time ever done. Couchet, first time he's ever drawn a sketch for a court case. Mm-hmm. They couldn't have brought somebody else in. I mean, I'm sure why didn't they use one of their other artists? They've got them.
Yeah.
That's a great point, and I wanted to that's a point that I've thought about so many other times when I've been going through this stuff, is how many firsts have there been in this case? How many firsts, how many has there ever been a search that was that long on a property in Wisconsin that fits the circumstances of this case? I don't believe so.
Well, you brought up, Thomas, about just the presence. I think you said they had more, or maybe you said that Kratz said they had more people, more police officers involved in this case than they did in the Jeffrey Dahmer case.
Well, they had some of the, and what I found interesting about this, because we were talking about the Dahmer case and the possibility that there were accomplices there, the possibility that the official version in that case perhaps had some large gaping holes in it, as a serial killer, if it, the stories around serial killers often do. I found it interesting that Kratz acknowledged that some of the officers that were on that scene were also some of the Milwaukee PD detectives who had worked the Dahmer case. I'd like to know who those people exactly were and exactly what they were doing there. Of course, they did have a veritable army of people from all types of different agencies. So,
Yeah, I mean, it was a ton of officers. What you think, Milbillie? I see your wheels turning over there.
Well, I don't even know where to start. Like, just the fact that Peggy Legislator states that Penny Bernstein identified the wrong person, that they had no wrongdoing whatsoever. But then you got Judy Dvorak clearly stating, "Oh, that sounds like Stephen Avery."
Mm-hmm.
That's wrongdoing.
I mean,
we
all knew.
Right
Go
there,
ahead.
How many other cases do you think they've used a skid steer for the investigation?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Let's just destroy the whole crime.
I talked to a forensic anthropologist, and most people, let's call them most guilters, will automatically say or call that junk science or whatever. Anything that any scientist or any expert that you can bring to give an biased opinion, because I don't tell these people what case I'm talking about. I just ask generalized questions.
Yeah.
And so when my forensic anthropologist told me the only way you would use machinery, if for some reason the bones were so deep that it wouldn't be feasible to extract them the proper way with the grid and stuff like that. Exactly.
Disco Pervert asked another question. She said, why was it only Sherry Culhane in the lab that was dealing with this? How many other cases would there be multiple people working on different aspects of that case testing? Why was it only Sherry?
Right. Why did she have all of the test, items to be tested in this case? I mean, that's an interesting question too. And why would they be training during probably one of the most high profile cases that's ever come across her desk?
That's true too. That was always one of those comedic moments, is the fact that she did something completely wrong while she was training students, But
yeah,
I mean, one thing I have to say is that how many other people in that lab do her job that didn't testify in Avery's 85 case? So, how many people wouldn't have at least the appearance of that type of a conflict? Why pick her? And I wanted to remark on Rohrer's deposition, which was just released, that he talks about that he received, or somebody received, I believe it was he received it personally, a call from a woman at the state crime lab. I believe, I would be willing to guess that was her. I don't know. He doesn't name the person, obviously, but based on the fact that she was the one who did the tests and delayed them for a year and then did them, I would guess that was probably her, which is interesting to see her just so much, involved in the process, in contact with Rohrer and all these other players, as this whole thing blows up. They're all, kind of the whole cast of characters is, dancing around together,
Yeah.
But you look at all four cases involving people in the nearby community, it's the same people involved in everything.
Yeah.
And like I said, y'all can jump in at any time. I'm just trying to, keep the conversation going. I have a bunch of notes here. I thought it was Cachet really could have been probably a comedian, because I found a lot of his statements kind of funny. One of the statements I thought was funny was, he says, when he's talking about, well, you know that, but I don't know that, when he's talking about the DNA and how DNA has been manipulated before. Well, he claims that the pubic hair that was found, he don't know where it came from, but that it could have been transferred from the blanket onto Penny Bernstein because they covered her up when they got to the scene. That's the funniest and stupidest thing I've ever heard.
It's funny though.
Everybody knows they do a pubic comb on a victim. They comb to catch any loose hairs, and they collect that as evidence. I mean, if you watched any criminal shows, you know that that's how it's done. So I mean, the fact that he thinks or suggested that it could be just transferred from a random blanket that somebody brought, that's crazy.
Yeah,
One of
sure.
Gregory Allen's pubic hairs on a blanket.
But
I
like
think
what
the
I find
combing
funny about
actually
that,
started back in '90s in some movies.
Okay, that so maybe that wasn't around then.
No, I'm being a smart ass man. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know. I can't pick up on your sarcasm.
no, that brought it up though. Like I was thinking that's something that's gone around in Manitowoc. That's kind of something that's gone around town for a long time, because I remember that when that guy, I think his name was Daniel something, he was the guy that really believed that Ryan did it, and he was doing interviews with people. He interviewed Kratz. Not interview, like he kind of went up to him with a camera and was yelling at him, and Kratz ran away from him. But he interviewed at one point a friend of Penny Bernstein's, she didn't want to be on camera, but she kept saying stuff like, he was really guilty for it, and the hair was just on the beach or something like that. So that's obviously something that they've circulated around town for a number of years. That's been one of those town rumors that's kind of circulated among these people.
This is completely off a topic, but like I said, this is a free for all, so it don't really matter where the conversation goes. But it just popped into my brain. One thing that bothers me, Milbillie, is that Gundrum, the Senator Mark was the name, first name Mark
Gundrum, yeah.
The statement that he made to me, now this might just be me, but it blows my mind when he said that if Stephen Avery did this, then maybe he was better off being in prison. I mean, I'm not sure if he realized the statement that he made when he said, so if you really think about it, it's like, hold on a second. So the fact that a person might commit a crime in the future is reason enough to imprison them for something they didn't do. I mean, I'm not sure he realized exactly how absurd that statement was.
No, it's just whatever part of the case you look at, it just doesn't make any sense. The things that transpire, things that are ignored.
Yeah, I mean, like y'all just talked about, there's so many firsts involved in this case, and there is tons of things that don't add up. And
problem is that maybe they're not first. Maybe it is common practice for them.
Right.
For all we know, that's their MO.
You would think that with this case, when this case came across their radar, you say, okay, Stephen Avery is suing us for $36 million, and here I'm just operating under the assumption that he did it. Okay, just for a moment, you would think that as soon as this case came across their radar, there was like, okay, we have to make sure every single thing is done right, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, because we're going to nail this guy this time. And they did the exact opposite.
If they were on the up and up when Andrew Colburn got the phone call from Mark Wiegert, he should have recused himself right there.
Right. And the entire department
just gave a deposition 2 weeks ago about this guy. No, he takes it upon himself to go talk to Stephen A. himself, and he doesn't file a report about doing it until instructed to 8 months later.
Right. And then claims that at one point Stephen Avery said that he said he didn't even talk to Teresa or whatever. But I noticed during the Cachet deposition, it seemed like there was some turmoil, and I didn't understand it. So that's why I'm asking y'all, because y'all are a lot better researchers than I am. Cachet said, though, it seemed like there was some turmoil between him and Thomas Kasurik. I couldn't gather a sense of what the timeline was on that, like whatever beef they had between them. Was that before or after the Penny Bernstein case? Do any of y'all know?
I believe that would have been after.
That'd have been after.
Okay. I mean, do y'all have any sense to what was going on with that? Because in the Cachet deposition, it talks about that a pretty good bit.
I believe they all been scratching each other's backs, doing favors for each other, and they have no choice but to do whatever one person says now.
Yeah, collective blackmail.
Right.
Like you got the Ricky case.
I mean, like
Ricky
On,
case,
for
all of it just
instance,
compounds, like the Ricky case, the Beltwell case. You know, the more years this type of atmosphere operates, the more people get pulled into this kind of web of wrongdoing and web of collective blackmail, where they all have something on each other, so nobody can kind of come forward. That's how these types of conspiracies operate, I think.
in the deposition, it said a guy named Vern Clement took the role, but Cachet still held the title. So they let Cachet have the title of chief investigator, I think it was, but he wasn't able to perform those duties that a guy named Vern Clement was. And I think Glenn asked him why that was. Why was Concert acting that way towards him? And he said he wasn't aware or something like that. So I just found it interesting, and I wanted to see if any of y'all maybe had any more insights on that.
I mean, I know he
I
called.
told somebody, if you're going to read his depositions, I'd start at the first one and work your way through it, because each one's going to lead into why they talk to the next person.
Right. That'd be hard to do. I really want the tapes. I really don't want to read all of that.
When it
When I
all
opened
comes
up,
out, we'll do a series just on the depositions, I'm sure.
right. I mean, when I opened the first PDF or whatever it was, I said, okay, let me see how many pages this is. Surely it can't be that long. And I think the first one was like 180 pages or 158 pages. I was like, oh my God, I can't do it, because my problem is I can read it, but I won't be able to retain. So I'll just try to make notes, while I'm reading through it. But it's just crazy. So,
I know that Couché, to what you were saying, Couché did call him a backstabber, which was interesting to me, because called Kusurek a backstabber, which echoes, of course, how Kratz referred to J.B. Van Hollen, kind of as stabbing him in the back and allowing him to be consumed by the scandal that eventually led to his ouster. So I think to these guys, it really is that mindset of Game of Thrones. They really just exist in this clique of knocking each other off, and little cliques within cliques. And I think that was a reflection of that. Kusurek and Couché, really, that kind of sounds like it should be at that level of ideally. I mean, maybe I'm being unrealistic, but ideally that should be not really a thing. People backstabbing each other when they're in a position of public trust. It should be according to the public, according to the code that we all agree on. But in Manitowoc and elsewhere in the world, it really is this kind of clique mentality. It's kind of this oligarchy, and little bosses are knocking each other off to consolidate their own power. And that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
well, I know down here, nothing. The where I work, we used to hire tons and tons of work release help from inmates that would get into the work release program, and then they would get hired through various companies. We used to have tons of them, probably 20 or 30 at any given time. And I've heard stories that's absolutely crazy, but I think the sheriff in this country, that position in general, they hold so much more power than it seems like they should be able to. So I know for a fact down here, there's almost nothing that happens in a parish that the sheriff isn't aware of. Like, he controls almost everything. And I believe I read something that in Louisiana it's even worse, the amount of power that the sheriff has. I mean, I thought all along that Thomas Kasurik, if there was any wrongdoing at all by the police in the Stephen Avery's case, Thomas Kasurik has to be a main player as far as at least having knowledge of what's going on, to me, regardless if he was a sheriff at the time or not, just for the simple fact that he was named in the lawsuit. So, I mean,
And the
go
fact
ahead.
that Avery's arrest was on the eve of his scheduled deposition. But go ahead. I always like to remind everybody of that, because I think that's
That
I think that
yeah,
tells us
exactly.
a lot about
Why is Dennis Jacobs calling Calumet County Dispatch?
Hey, Milbillie,
talk.
don't think we can get. I don't think we're hearing you.
Really?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, well,
Or
why
maybe
is
I'm not
Dennis
hearing
Jacobs,
anybody else.
rest in peace, calling Calumet County Dispatch, wanting to talk to the lead investigator?
Sorry about that.
Because he just talked to his neighbor. His neighbor is Tom Couture.
Really? Could you say that again? I don't think Thomas was connected there for a second.
Yeah,
Just
I lost
so
you guys. I'm sorry.
On the 11th of November.
Okay.
Dennis Jacobs calls Calumet County Dispatch asking to talk to the investigator because he just talked to his neighbor. His neighbor's Tom Kirk.
Huh.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Interesting.
Dennis Jacobs, huh? I'll have to get more information.
Another strange thing, when they put the obituary thing up on the internet for Dennis Jacobs, the Kukurks commented and left a little comment, and then they deleted it.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
What was that about? And I noticed you call him Kukurik. Is it Kukurik or Kusurik?
Kukurk, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, yeah, there's clearly some type of very close association between Dennis Jacobs and the Kasuriks.
A lot of the Manitowoc officers, sheriff officers, live in that general cul-de-sac right there.
You guys seen that? I believe that the nurse that took those swabs off of Avery, the illegal swabs, was a neighbor. Her name was Fritsch, and she was a neighbor of Rob Herman.
Yeah. Well, how about Bush? Is it Bushman? Yeah, Bushman's ex-wife was a school counselor. She trained people.
I get it. Look, I've lived in small towns. It's not unfathomable that a lot of people can know everybody or live close. But if you look at this case,
Herman.
If you look at this case, there's so many, and we've talked about it many times. There's so many coincidences. It's like, okay, there's no way. There is no way that every single one of these can just be a mere coincidence, and that's one thing that just really fascinates me. So, Thomas, I talked to you earlier in the week. We was discussing certain things, and I don't remember if you was. You was the first one. I started asking you questions about Kratz and different campaign financing stuff to look into, and I think you immediately pointed out that Tom Pierce, the photographer, donated. Actually, he donated the most money.
Yeah, he was a big donor
to the Kratz re-election campaign. You want
to Citizens for Ken Kratz, as they called it,
right?
And I found that interesting for a couple of reasons. I mean, for one thing, Thomas Pierce, if you look into his history of donations, he's only given donations to Democrats in the past. Kratz ran as a Republican, so it was kind of an anomalous thing for Pierce to be donating to Ken Kratz. Also, the other people, if you looked at who else donated to Citizens for Ken Kratz, it was mostly lawyers and stuff, people who were from that area, people who were probably personal friends of Kratz, so it was kind of Tom Pierce's name looked kind of out of place in all of that. Of course, as I said, it's perfectly possible that, he could have just, let's say Tom Pierce believes that Kratz convicted his friend's killers,
right.
Maybe he just has goodwill for him towards him for that purpose and everything like that, he believes in the conviction that he did. But, it did raise the question to me as to whether there is some type of a connection between Tom Pierce and Ken Kratz, socially or otherwise. And I thought it was interesting, some of the other donations that came to Citizens for Ken Kratz in 2008. It included a man named, what was his name? Wambach. Daniel Wambach, or Douglas Wambach, he was the assistant attorney general that J.B. Van Hollen had actually appointed to head the investigation into the Kratz sexting scandal, and he was among Kratz's political donors. And also another one of the donors to Citizens for Ken Kratz was Alan Bushman, who was a cousin of Mike Bushman. So it was a cozy circle of people. Kratz's lawyer in the sexting scandal was another one who was a donor for Citizens for Ken Kratz, and it's been speculated online that in fact Kratz was offered a congressional seat for his convicting Avery and Dassey. I don't know if that's true, but that's been speculated that, because of some of the politics involved, because of some of the how Avery's case in 2003 really reflected badly on the death penalty, that there might have been certain political forces in power that, were behind this whole thing of, interested in seeing a conviction and interested in Kratz securing that conviction and possibly willing to reward him for that. That's been speculation that's been out there.
Right. And I just found it very interesting that he had donated to him. And like you said, that could be completely innocent because maybe he views Kratz as doing, maybe Kratz to him did such a good job at putting Teresa's killers away that, maybe he felt like he wanted to donate to the first Republican that he ever donated to because he always donated to Democrats. Possible, I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility, but it was interesting that he donated the most out of the entire list because once I started clicking on names and I looked at all the donations, even Bushman's cousin, Pierce, donated the most. Maybe that's because he had the most, money out of all of the people. I don't know. I don't know that for a fact, but I just thought it was an interesting tidbit, I guess you could say. But now you was talking about this I put up earlier. I think I put it up too soon. Did you want to cover that?
Sure. Now that we're on Tom Pierce, I could cover that as well as that.
Okay.
This is a clip. This is a screen capture from Tom Pierce's website. Now, of course, for anybody who doesn't know who Tom Pierce is, this is Teresa Halbach's kind of self-professed mentor. She occupied space with him. Her business shared space with his business. She was actually briefly an employee of his. He operated the Pierce Photography Studios, and this was the studio that was being used for some of these infamous porn shoots with Bradley Check and other people. And Pierce Photography, I mean, in this capture from his website, which this is the only rendition of the website, it's never looked like this. The biography on the website has never looked like this before or since this one capture of the page. And on this capture of the page, Pierce refers to the White House having been among his clients. And, he was hired to photograph First Lady Hillary Clinton, Vice President Al Gore, and his then wife Tipper Gore, and Wisconsin's very own Congressman Jay Johnson, nationally known bands, former television or current television personalities, local television personalities. So, in other words, Tom Pierce was the photographer to the stars, he says. And he also refers to Army service during 1968, 1971, the Vietnam period. I had, Susan Sims saying, whoa, that was my reaction when I first found this a couple of years ago, and I couldn't find it for a long time, that Tom Pierce is connecting himself to top DC officials. Who knows, whether that's that could just be Tom Pierce trying to, puff himself up, or it could be something, to investigate, that certainly is interesting.
Well, I mean, I think if any time a photographer is linked to people as high up as the president of the United States and people like that, I think it's always worth noting. I mean, we'd be crazy not to mention that because that's a pretty big deal, I mean, if your profession, you got invited to do whatever it is you do, technical wise or whatever at the White House, I mean, it's a pretty big deal. So I think it's anything like that is always worth noting.
Yeah, especially when you think about, the connection to the club and all of that. One thing I've always thought about is that these photos that Dave Bogatka talks about, that he saw photos produced with prominent citizens such as teachers and football coaches and stuff, posed in sexually compromising situations. Now, it's interesting that there would be these photos when we have, in this case, central to it is photography and photographers such as Teresa Halbach and Tom Pierce. I'm not suggesting that there was any link to this operation, but it is interesting, the possibility that we have the, these local photographers kind of tied into this at all, when we do have this whole side kind of story of, sexually explicit photographs.
Now, Thomas, you mentioned about the dispatch calls, and I think Milbillie I told him one of the questions you asked about the night Bagata seen Stephen Avery at the gas station. I think he said with a blonde haired woman. I think Milbillie, didn't you say you had some information on that or something? I remember reading.
It's not from Halloween, but yeah.
Yeah, Stephen Avery. It's in Calumet officer transmissions. You hear them radio into the command post that Stephen Avery's at the checkpoint wanted to come on the property to get some keys. And he's accompanied by a blonde female, which I believe is his daughter.
Okay. Well, I tried listening to the some of the dispatch calls, and I'm not quite sure how y'all can make most of that out. It seems it's like very distorted, or is that just one of the ones I tried listening to, or are they all that hard to hear?
No, it all depends on if it's the transmissions between officers or if it's actually a dispatch call.
Okay.
Some of the dispatch calls, you can't really hear what they're saying either. The audio is pretty jacked, but for the most part, I've listened to it so much, I can pick out people's voices now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been with you a couple of times in certain various settings where y'all have been listening to them, and I could hear you in the background. You know exactly what they're saying and who's saying it, and I'm sitting there. All I hear is like just static. I can't even make out what it is, but it's crazy how you can decipher most of that crap.
Well,
But
if you want the audio, I'll give it to you. It's just 19,037 files you're gonna have to go through.
yeah, that
That's just Calumet.
Have you went through all of them?
Yes, multiple times, and I'm still going through them again.
I don't understand how you have the time to, or really all of y'all. I mean, Thomas too. I mean, I'll ask him a question, and he has like just file after file. Like I can ask him a question, and he'll send me 20 articles on it within like 10 seconds. I don't even know how that's possible, but it's a crazy the amount of work y'all put into this, and that's why I'm glad to have y'all on here.
I don't know how long Thomas has been into this case, but I've been into it for quite a long time. So I've had a lot of time to do a lot of research.
Yeah. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe because I'm just now getting into it, maybe you acquired this amount of research over that length of time. To me, I'm just envisioning, just for instance, what I did today, the time it took for me to read through those cases. You know, we got our other guests here now.
Jeff.
Hey.
I thought Jeff was showing us the backside there.
Yeah, I got another.
Good evening,
Mr. Jeff. He's a good researcher himself, and also he's really good with cell phone data and stuff. How you doing today?
I'm doing real great. I've been meaning to start a segment called Cell Phone School.
Yeah, it'd be a good idea. How are you making out with the virus stuff? Everything going good up there, or what?
It's stressful. I'll tell you what, it really is. My wife is a healthcare worker, and her identical twin sister is a healthcare worker, and both of them have had potential exposures that have come out negative in the past week, and it's just been, oh my God, what's going on? So. I thought I was in 14-day quarantine, but I'm good. I'm good.
Right down here,
every day is like a Jack in the Box when they test it.
Exactly.
Down here, it's taken a while to start seeing some of the effects, but you're starting to see some of the empty stores and stuff like that starting to take place down here. But we've just been talking about various topics. It's kind of a free for all. So anything you want to add to or anything like that, you feel free to. But we've been talking about a lot of the depositions with Cachet and Mark Rohr. You have any thoughts on any of those, Mr. Jeff?
I do. To me, it's astounding. Jean Couchet's deposition that he actually thinks that the work that he did was. That sort of trumped all the DNA evidence that came up. He just can't understand how his excellent police work was overcome by what was shown by the Innocence Project is from the pubic hair sample that came back in this race kit. He just can't believe it where this DNA came from, and he actually questions. Whether or not where this pubic hair might have came from. It's almost an embedded confession.
Right.
When he says, "Was DNA tampered? Can you tamper with DNA evidence?" He says, "Yes." He doesn't even take a breath. Yes.
Yeah. He said it's been manipulated before, and I don't know where it came from. It's funny that you bring that up because I was telling these guys that I thought it was hilarious when he said that it could have been transferred from the blanket that they put on her at the scene. So I'm like, yeah, Gregory Allen's got a pubic hair on some random blanket that a bystander brought with them to cover. You know, it just
Yeah.
it's and that's a recurring theme with all of these people is, for instance, Peterson, when he was on the stand, he didn't think that them being involved with the Avery case was any wrongdoing. And then when no, I'm sorry, it was Kobe. No, it was Link. When they asked him, do you think it would have been more fair to Stephen Avery if you would have told Uyghur and them that you had been deposed instead of you rummaging through his trailer? He said no, but it would be more fair to Uyghur and Fassbender. I mean, every single person down the line, you can see clearly the disdain that they have for Stephen Avery.
Oh yeah.
Part of the problem with that for me is that them as law enforcement, if they actually cannot see the fact that there's a problem with them being tied to this, they're not actually logically thinking officers, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because on the outside looking in, anybody that would have been involved with the previous case, it's a conflict of interest. It's been pointed out time and time again. It
Right.
flat out is, but they don't see it because it doesn't suit their narrative. That's why.
Yep. And
that's what
the fact, go ahead, Thomas.
Well, I'm just going to say that that's what you always hear them saying, the guilters and stuff, talk about the coroner, talking about that, she wasn't supposed to be there because she was an elected official and she was a branch of the county and the county was being sued. Well, so was the sheriff's office. There is no distinction between the coroner and the sheriff's office. They're both part of the same entity, which is Manitowoc County. So if you're not going to let the coroner be there, then you're not going to let the sheriff be there. It's that simple.
But why did they wait so long for them to notify Pago that there's a lawsuit going on?
Yeah.
Why didn't they say that on the same night that she was reported missing?
This is the thing. If they were
that, or did they tell them that? That's the question. They're lying about the things that took place on the 3rd.
Right. Well, if their involvement was supposed to be strictly to provide equipment, I mean, you could have brought the equipment to the main road or say at the entrance.
And go for stuff.
Listen to dispatch. You hear Pago himself say, "Manitowoc's in charge. We're assisting them."
I wasn't aware of that. That's crazy.
Like someone calls, I think they're talking to, it might be Uyghur Pago. I don't know which one it was. They're asking if they want to bring the crime lab down from Manitowoc's crime lab. And they're like, no, we don't think we need it yet. Well, somebody makes the call and brings it down.
Pago.
Wally calls, Wally Waldorf, wanting to know where the hell the crime lab went. Did somebody take you for a joyride? Because it's gone. So obviously they're not even contacting the people that are in charge of what they're supposed to be in charge with.
The fact that, I mean, I guess announcing that, that Calumet was going to be in charge of this, I guess that was just to appease the public, because other than saying that, there was no, they didn't distance themselves from this investigation, not one bit. I mean, that's the crazy part. They're flooding on the property. They're everywhere. I mean, I know you have state patrol, and I know you have Calumet and firefighters and volunteers and all this, but if you look, and we've all know, we've talked about it many times before. If you start looking at every key piece of evidence, Manitowoc's there when every bit of it's found.
Of course, and you got Uyghur rescheduling people's schedules so he knows who's on the property, where they're going to be. We got officers there for 36 hours straight because they feel that if they leave, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Why are the Calumet instructed to go in on these searches and babysit the other officers?
And that's exactly what they're having to do, is babysit them.
We should run through the evidence, right? You got the key, we got the FL, we got the bone fragments, right? Every single one of them, Manitowoc.
Yep.
All right. Every single one of them. Link and Colburn was there when the key was found.
Mm-hmm.
And Planet, my bad.
And Jost for the bones.
The guy that's now heading the Ricky investigation, Jost.
Yep.
right? And then with FL, there was tons of traffic in and out of that log, but most notably was Link. And who was there? I forgot who it was when they was actually
Probably
Remaker, right? But when they was snapping the photograph, I mean, and that's the thing. If you and look, trust me, you guys know maybe
well, like I
other
said,
people don't.
if you look at the sign in, sign out sheets for the logs, and then you compare that to the logs that they had in March, those are the people that are involved.
Right. It's just crazy to me how any of this, like I told you earlier, you would think that if Stephen Avery was 100% guilty of doing this, you would have think when this hit their radar, they would have recused themselves. None of them would have been involved in it whatsoever, and that every I would have been dotted and every T crossed, and that they would have made sure this was the most perfect investigation they ever conducted. But it was 100% the exact opposite.
The problem was though that they couldn't. You know, if they wouldn't have been part of this,
then
if they wouldn't have been, yeah. And also the other thing is, look at all the photos that we have gotten. How many photos are of nothing? They're taking
Like
photos.
They zoomed in on the flower.
Yeah,
And you can see the individual fibers.
he had a squirrel moment. Oh, look at the pretty little flower.
And
That could be
then
used to fuel the fire, the dried leaves and such. You know?
look at, we don't have one clear, legible picture of the VIN.
Yeah.
Right.
Nope.
Some seem to be specifically blurred out. I don't know why, but you know.
I mean, there's no even with the bones, there's no photographs, documentation of all of the bones being carefully tagged and documented and placed on a tarp. And because how it was explained to me is you would grid that area off, and you would extract those bones, and you would have a tarp laid next to you, and you would put that bone, once it's identified, in theory, that you would want to get a sense of where that bone goes on the body. So if you had a femur, for instance, you would put that down here, and you would place all these bones approximately where they would be at on the body, and you would also document where these bones are found and the conditions they were found in, etc. None of that was done.
You would need a forensic pathologist to do that, because the biggest bone fragment, we're talking on the order of less than a couple inches, right? The untrained person who's digging these things up is not going to have any idea where these bones come from. They're just not recognizable to anybody without a medical degree.
Well, was there any forensic anthropologists on the site? Because the pictures that I've seen, they dig it all up. They bring it to another section of the yard. They dump it and spread it out. And you have an officer and another guy that's kind of thumbing through it. And I don't see a forensic anthropologist there on the scene. So apparently they didn't look at it until it got to the lab.
That's right. Deb Kadich, the Manitowoc coroner, had actually assembled a team that included a forensic anthropologist, and she was the one that wasn't allowed to go on the scene.
Right.
Then you also had the forensic anthropologist that testified. And Milbillie knows about this because you guys were looking at this from another case where she got the fetus was actually a raccoon.
Eisenberg, no, baby bird. It was a baby bird.
Or baby bird, something. And that's who you want, like, looking into this serious of a case.
Christine Rudy, that was her name, right? Christine Rudy. Yeah.
There we go.
Yep.
And they had Buting and Strain. They hired or brought a forensic anthropologist to testify that none of that was done right. I believe, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did in the trial.
Right.
It just came out. I think that the best that that they managed to turn it into was more of a he said she said kind of situation.
Yeah.
But without any real impact.
And half the things in this case, the jury didn't even get to see.
Yeah.
It's just like in Brendan Dassey's case, they watched the video, but they didn't get to see the part where he recants.
Yeah,
I
mean,
because his lawyers
why-
were
why
unable
would-
to
why
really
would-
show that part.
his attorneys agreed they didn't need to see the whole thing.
Why would his lawyers agree? This is my question. Why would his lawyers agree to that part of the video not being shown?
Well, I got
What
some answers.
reasoning could Thomas? Can you
That's a good
come
question.
offer any reasoning for that?
I mean, I think the filmmakers, suggested a reason when they showed those two guys, the Fremgen and the other one. I know Mark Fremgen. I don't know the other one's name, but the two of them were palling around with the prosecutors constantly outside of the trial and everything like that. Seemed very chummy with them. And if you look at Mark Fremgen in particular, you'll see that he graduated from Marquette University, which seems to be the incubator for Wisconsin's political and legal elite. If you look at this case, a lot of the lawyers involved, you just see Marquette over and over again as being the alma mater of the various figures in this case. And in fact, a lot of them
We know
went to
that.
Marquette. Oh, I'm sorry.
We know why that is, Thomas, right? Because if you go to Marquette, you don't need to pass the Wisconsin State Bar. You're automatically passed with a law degree from Marquette.
There
Isn't
you
that
go.
the case?
The diploma, the great diploma privilege there.
State of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But Marquette, what I found very interesting was what I termed the Marquette Parade, which I believe Angela Sutkowitz, Ken Kratz, Michael Griesbach, Mark Fremgen, which was one of those Brendan Dassey lawyers in 2007 who stipulated to not play the end of the tape where he says that they put it in his head, the story. All of these people went to Marquette at the same time. Norm Gahn during this same time period. If you look at it, it's 1984, 1985, 1986. They were all attending. Their attendance overlapped, all of these different players. So Mark Fremgen had occasion to have connections to some of these various individuals via the Marquette kind of alumnus circles or whatever, because they were all going there at the same time.
Right. Well, we haven't heard from you in a little while, Jamie. You got anything you want to add? Throw in the bucket over here.
I had a couple things that popped into my mind. I'm actually watching the chat a little bit too, but now I can't think of what they were. I'm sure I'll figure them out.
Yeah, I told you. Anytime, feel free to interrupt. It's a free for all. You can say, whatever.
Yeah, but it's good conversation. I mean, the stuff. Again, there's so many anomalies in this case.
Like I said, I can talk about this case all day.
Yeah,
Depends on which part you want to start on, and who knows where we're going to end up.
Yeah,
Bob Bailey said about he's talking about saw marks on the bones. I mean, that's another thing that I've always wondered about myself.
Yeah, but that bone wasn't found anywhere near Avery's property.
Exactly.
None of the bones
I mean,
were found on Avery's property.
I've always
off of Avery's. Like I said, Manitowoc planted it. Calumet found it.
That's it.
I mean, I don't think Calumet, like if you look into the guys in Calumet, you see that it's really been an intergenerational, it's almost indistinguishable from Manitowoc in a way because they all socialize together. They all intermarry with each other.
Well, just like the officers they sent to Marinette. He's from Manitowoc. He's talking to Stephen Avery. He's from the area. Why do you think he was sent in there? And the fact of what Wiegert and Fassbender did to Brendan Dassey knows that they're all in on it.
Yeah. I think that interrogation proves their complicity totally. I mean, and if you look at Mark Wiegert in particular, I have his father's obituary. His father's from Manitowoc, and his father belonged to a bunch of clubs from there. So, Wiegert was probably born into, this kind of Manitowoc Calumet kind of oligarchy little social club type of thing that goes on. Being neighbors, I'm sure that the elite of law enforcement and city government and all of the politics and such, there's a lot of intermingling that goes on to the point where bringing Calumet in to be the kind of independent observer is kind of an illusion. It really is the same entity in a way because, it might not be officially the same entity or the same agency, but, in terms of, these agencies being more of a community, it's the same community. It's the same. They all intermarry. They're all part of the same families and part of the same social clubs. And, people like Mark Wiegert, know everybody from Manitowoc anyway. So,
Everybody knows
Another
everybody.
another question I had since I have all y'all on here, Cachet. When I was reading the deposition, it says that Cachet took some interviews he conducted in '95 and '96 when they had post conviction proceedings going on. That he took some home, I believe he said, and he don't know what happened to him after that. Can anyone possibly shed light on that? Because I'm thinking that
Well,
I'm
why did the
thinking
sheriff have a personal file on Stephen Avery locked away in his safe?
Yeah.
And then when
Gregory
BTI agent comes to see it, he says, "Oh, you can just look at this, but you can't take it with you. I'll make copies and then I'll give it to you.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Stay here."
Well, there's so many of these things. Obviously, we all know about the Bealey CD, and Jay Jacks will tell you this is one of the things that he's really got a big problem with is the fact that I can't remember if it was Remacher or Weird that had the RAV4, the spare tire cover at his house for 30 days. For what? Why are these people allowed to take evidence?
Uyghur, wasn't it?
I think it was Weird. Why are they allowed to take evidence home? Well, where in any policy manual does it say, yeah, take evidence home and study it?
Look at the Ricky case.
Yeah,
Driving around with pieces of the car.
I was about to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I knew Tom. I knew as soon as Jamie brought that up, I said, I know what Thomas is thinking right now. He's thinking of the Hotstetler case.
Yeah. Robert Herman, I believe, just checks out of the scene with pieces of vehicle that he brings to an auto salvage yard, and then comes back from that auto salvage yard, his family's auto salvage yard, and we're supposed to just believe that the pieces that he's bringing back are the same ones that he took from the scene.
No chain of custody.
No chain of custody. Yeah.
Right.
That's how it's.
That would be
that's
Cleveland
how
Auto Salvage, in case there's any
Like
curiosity.
Jeremy Hawkins leaving the Calumet County Sheriff's Department with the evidence storage keys in his pocket. And where is he going? To Manitowoc's evidence locker.
Yeah.
And he's specifically instructed, make sure you put the keys back before you leave. He calls dispatch. I posted the whole call on my channel. You won't believe this. He goes with an elaborate story on why he left the keys in his pocket.
Jeez, Mary.
So that's how the first time it's ever happened, right? 10, 15 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's also some interesting stuff that I'm looking into with Murder in the Bayou. I want to say the warden to the jail. His wife worked at the police department. I think she was head of evidence over the evidence room, and she wound up getting fired for some various things, destroying evidence or something like that. And so, I mean, that's an interesting case. I'm not sure if any of y'all looked into that, but if you want to talk about police corruption,
well, we
got
the first batch of Calumet County photos, the 2000 something. We have photos of them going into Manitowoc's evidence room, taking photos of evidence, but they actually don't get to obtain it. They're taking photos of Cuss Road prior. Somebody took photos prior to the Wisconsin State Patrol being there.
Clearly some serious interest on the part of all agencies involved.
Photos of the same 3 locations: Deer Camp, Cuss Road. Wow. And they also were taking pictures of the property that's just south of Seaberts on the west side of the road. Why? Well, I don't know, but I found out through a friend that the Osmondsons have friends that live there.
Interesting.
Well, dogs are like in my
Osmondsons?
Friends of the Osmondsons.
In my line of work, some of the equipment I use has to be calibrated. It's very sensitive. I was shocked in a way to know that with these dogs, they actually, in a sense, they do calibration checks. They make sure that they're still on top of their game. They have documents, that shows, okay, this dog passed his test or whatever. And the fact that the dog's alerted over there, I mean that right there, if they're tracking, was dogs tracking her scent when they alerted over there? And on the burn barrel at the hunting camp. All of that makes
Uyghur wants to argue that they had 5 days to clean up. Well, they had 5 days to frame Avery too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Well,
They arrested him.
If you look at some of McGill's posts, the fact that what the dogs actually hit on is dead skin cells,
Okay.
and Ryan Hilligus was living on that, living in Teresa's apartment for days and days, and we simply just don't know that those dogs weren't tracking him and what his search party did. Based on the fact that he was living there and his skin cells might have got on those shoes that they used to track the scent dogs. Now the Cavern dog is completely different, right? But the scent dogs, we just don't know.
Let me ask you a question, because so did the cadaver dog or scent dog hit on the burn barrel at the hunting camp?
Cadaver.
I mean, how is this not extremely relevant? I mean, a dog, in my opinion, a highly trained dog, a cadaver dog, what other reason would there be for an alert on that burn barrel?
Why was Kratz so focused not to pay any attention to them bones in the quarry?
Well, if it didn't point at Stephen Avery, it wasn't worth considering, right? That's what it is, right?
But it's just it's crazy how these facts can be out there, and there are people that just goes right along with anything and everything that the state theorizes on or says, and they're just happy and content to trust them with whatever they say.
Personally, and I don't believe that. I think that there's a lot of people that just believe the state for whatever reason, for emotional reasons. But there's also, I should say, and I think it's important to realize, there is a well-heeled public relations effort that was enacted after the release of the docuseries, and that was, if you look up the stories in the Manitowoc Herald Times, they even have stories about it of Off-the-Record Strategies, which was the same DC public relations firm that the Bush administration hired to make the case for the 2003 invasion of Iraq. This same public relations firm that did so with Mark Feifel, who was Bush's deputy communications director. Manitowoc County got in touch with them shortly after the release of the docuseries and asked them about waging a public relations campaign to counter the negative press. And if you look at Off the Record Strategies website, one of the things that Mark Feifel specializes in is online strategy campaigns. He actually won an award for online strategy campaigns in 2004. So I think it's distinctly possible that some of this backlash that we see from the Stephen Avery is guilty kind of subreddit and stuff. I think some of that might be synthetic in nature. Might come from these public relations firms and online strategy campaigns that Mark Feifel specializes in.
Well, before we get off here, guys, and I want to say that this has been incredible to have all of y'all on here at one time, and I definitely want to do it again soon. But before we get on here, I'm going to go to each one of y'all and let you give your closing comments or whatever to anything you want to say about anything. We can start with you, Tommy.
Yeah, I had a lot of things I was thinking about in this case lately, as to I think that would be a good project to kind of compile all of the things that in this case that are at least officially firsts, things that are unprecedented, things that deviate drastically from the norm, and kind of compile that list of firsts and kind of list that, that would be a way to kind of come back at some of these people that try to say that, there's nothing to see here, this is all, Netflix and all that. If you could point out a lot of these things that are just clear anomalies in terms of criminal investigation, that could be very helpful in showing people that there is really something here that is, I'll let other people take the floor here.
You want to go ahead, Mr. Jeff?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, that was really great, Tom. My closing comment is always the same: is that people who don't have anything to hide don't continue to hide things. I try to stay a little bit active on the Twitter sphere, and I love Bruce McGuire's recent tweets. Bruce McGuire hosts the podcast called Mind Shock. Right. And his recent tweets have been laden with the comment, that the truth is not afraid of investigation. And if they have such a great case against Stephen Avery, why aren't they releasing the RAV? Why is it so hard to get the damn pictures that Coburn took? He took more pictures than National Geographic did over the course of that investigation.
I have audio proving that he had the camera. You also I have audio of them asking for more camcorder tape. That's on Manitowoc. I tell you, man. So what does Manitowoc have that they're hiding? Or what did they destroy?
If they don't have anything to hide, why not produce it if their case is so damn good?
Why is none of their dispatch time-stamped? Why is the whole fourth missing?
It reminds me, I was just...
Ding.
Why do I keep saying why?
Go ahead, sorry.
It'd probably be faster for them to tell us what they did right instead of what they did wrong.
Oh,
Go ahead, Thomas.
Yes, sir.
I was just watching one of Milbillie's old videos about Brendan Dassey's interrogation tapes, and where he's pointing out where the tape just skips, like at portions and stuff. There's portions that have been removed, and you just start seeing the timestamp just start going crazy and stuff, and it skips I think at one point it skips like 10 minutes or something like that or more. 26, yeah. It's like, just
at 26 minutes and 30 seconds, not 26.
You just see the timestamp just jump, like nothing's nothing.
The
out.
big jump is 26 minutes. It goes for like a couple seconds, then a minute, and then it goes from like 11 something to 12:26 p.m. And it's the whole part where, Gilter is the one that did that for one, and it's the part where Uyghur asks him who shot her in the head. That whole spiel. Why they chose to take that part out? Don't know. That whole part that's missing, you can find it in Making a Murder. And there's also other videos out there that are the full interrogation, part 1.
And it shows the same skip.
Yeah, they needed a coherent narrative from Brendan, and Brendan is not capable of coherence, so they had to cherry pick. And that 26 minutes, he wasn't talking about things in the right tone and the right place and in the right way, so they had to skip over that.
Same reason
Go ahead, Thomas.
Same reason that early interview. I mean, I believe it was Fox Hills where they didn't record anything, and they just the whole thing was just a totally black mark.
They
didn't record anything, but then they played it. Then they played it later.
They turned their eye on Brendan on 2:15, right after Jody walked out that interrogation room.
I just wish that Mark Rohr could have prepped Brendan before Brendan's interrogations. That way, Brendan could have just said, "I don't recall" the entire time. Jamie, we're going to give you the final word, sir.
For one, this has been a great and a fun conversation. These
really
are the ones that I really actually like, the ones that are open-ended. You can talk about anything, and the fact that we've talked about probably, I'd say, 15 different subjects tonight is just proof that, and we've only touched the surface. There's more things missing that we don't have, or that Queso doesn't have. Kathleen, hopefully she has it. I really am, after seeing her last tweet, that she's going to really make some people mad. I really hope that's true. Yeah, and I think it is. But we tried so hard in this case to hide the truth, like Jeff was saying earlier. They've tried so much to hide it. They tried to hide it from his first appeal lawyer, and they're trying to hide stuff from Kathleen. Hopefully, a couple weeks after all this COVID stuff goes away, we get to see the state's response.
We gotta wait till April.
Did they give him another?
Well, because of the virus.
They gave him another 30 days.
21 days.
So I'm actually going to say that China didn't need it. Maybe Manitowoc
as if they freaking need it.
I think it's April 7th.
What are they doing?
Yeah, it's just
they're sitting at home. Now it's the perfect time to get the goddamn writing done. What the hell do they need the time for? Are they doing what are they doing if it's not researching the damn case?
They're scrambling is what I'm saying, and delaying.
No, their arguments hold up rationally. I mean, it's just like, who cares that everybody said that these remains were human? Who cares that the police said it? Who cares that that the forensic anthropologist initially said it? You can't prove that these are human bones, so therefore they're not. it's a
Well, guys, I appreciate every one of y'all coming on, and you're right, Jamie. This has been fun and interesting, and I definitely want to do it again with the same panel. And I think we could fit one more. So, if one of y'all have another guest y'all want to bring on, I think we could fit 6. But that's going to be it for tonight. And everybody, if y'all have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comment section. And see y'all next time.
Thanks all for joining.
Thank you,
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody.
yeah. Thanks
Absolutely.
everyone.